Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be going over through the types that we're going to be using and seeing in TypeScript. But just in case you're new here, I'm Walid, also known as Ultimate Dev, and my goal is to help you build your dream world faster in Horizon. So without any further thing to say, let's get to it. So you might wonder why types in TypeScript are very important and what they're used for. A type tells TypeScript what kind of value a variable, parameter, or function can hold. For example, can a variable hold a number, can it hold a string, or a boolean, or can it hold a more complex data structure? And they're important because they help us prevent errors before we even run the code. They're also helpful because they improve code readability and they provide autocomplete and intelligence. Basically, when you start writing something, it autocompletes it for you, or it tells you what kind of value you should provide it. Should you provide it a number? Should you provide a string? Or other kind of stuff. So since we're talking about types in this video, we're only going to use the desktop editor to create a new script, and then we're going to continue in Visual Studio Code. So let's head to the scripts section and create a new script. We're going to call it types, and we're going to press enter and wait for it to load, and then let's double click the script and wait for it. Before we start, just a quick recap about Visual Studio Code. On the left hand side, you're going to have the scripts you created. So as you see, we created the types.ts script in the desktop editor, and we can see it over here. And as you see, we have the VIP only trigger and the learn_ts from previous videos. So let's forget about these, and this is the only script that we're going to focus on this video. So let's start by re-importing the Horizon core library by just deleting the first line, deleting the hz dot, and same thing for the one below. And to re-import it, we're just gonna remove the t and type it again. And this basically we get the same library, but we don't have to include the hz dot at the beginning. So just less things to write. So let's press enter a little bit to add more space. And let's get some things from the learn_ts to start explaining. Don't worry, I'll go slowly and I'll explain everything in detail. So if you see any code that you don't understand, that's completely fine. Just stick around and I'll go over through everything. So basically, I'm gonna copy this code, go back to the types and paste that over here. So we have two types basically. We have primitive types and we have non-primitive types. Primitive types are things that are already built in TypeScript. These are like very simple variables. So we have number, which basically contains a number. So it can be anything like 23 or any other number. We have strings. Strings are basically text, and to write text in TypeScript, you basically open two quotation marks and you can write anything you want over here, like that. We also have Boolean. Boolean is basically two states. It's either true or it's false. It cannot be anything else. And we have null and undefined. We'll get to null and undefined in a second. For non-primitive types, we have object and we have array. I want to also note that there is more types, but these are the basics that you're going to encounter throughout most of the time. So objects is basically a container that contains more types or more values. So you can have an object that has a number or a string, or it can has a number or a more complex data type. But for an array, it's a bit different. It's multiple data types of the same type. So if we had a number array, it's going to contain many numbers. It doesn't matter how much, but it's going to contain many numbers. So it could contain 20, it contain 34, it contain 44, it could have also 55, for example, and so on. So basically arrays, they contain as much as you want of the same type, while an object contains as much as you want different types. Okay, let's save that and let's go to the learn_ts again and copy that. So let's paste this in the start section. So for example, here are the primitive types. We have favorite number. We just give it 5000, for example. We set it to 5000. And to annotate types, so to tell that favorite number is a number, we just add a colon at the end over here and just write number. So here's the syntax basically. You have const that says this is a constant, and then you have the variable name, which in this case is favorite number. And then we write the type over here. So we just add a colon and then just the type of this variable. And then we set it equal to a value. So here's how you annotate types and variables. And one thing to note, if you remove that, as long as it's a simple primitive types, if you just hover over it, it should tell you that it's a number. If you use let, it should fix that thing. See, it says favorite number is a number. So basically, const is a constant, so it stays the value forever, while let allows you to change the value, so on. So it so using let displays it over here more accurately. So as you see, favorite number is in fact a number without even annotating, so without even placing a colon and the type over here. So this type is, so when it does that without you placing any types, this is called an inferred type because TypeScript automatically knows that the type of this variable is a number. But for more complex stuff, it's not gonna know that, so you're gonna have to annotate it by writing a colon and whatever type you want over here. In this case, it's just a number. So we're done with this one. So let's move to the second one. For example, the name. It automatically infers that it's a string, but to annotate it, we can write string over here. Now we're writing simple annotations just because you're still learning, but in the future, you don't have to do it for basic things, but you're gonna have to be using it for more complex things because it helps in auto complete and it helps in preventing errors. So is programmer, this is a boolean because it only can contain a true or false, so we can do that by writing a colon and boolean. And now let's get to undefined and null. So basically for undefined, it's a variable declared, but it doesn't have a value yet. So that means that we know that there is gonna be a score in this example, but we don't know what the score should be until the game actually runs. So because we know there's a variable, but we don't know what its type, or we don't know what its type yet, we're gonna have to wait until the game actually runs and then we can get the type. So that's the meaning of undefined. So variable declared but doesn't have a value yet. This is a bit different than null. Null, it's basically you're explicitly saying that this variable has no value. Basically, these two, many people get these two, both of these confused together, but there is a subtle meaning between each one. Basically, the different use case, if you wanna know which one to use, it depends on the context. If you know that you have a variable, but you're still unsure what value to give it, or the value of it needs to wait until runtime, you give it undefined. And if you have a variable that you wanna make sure that this is explicitly has no value, then you give it null. Now let's go to the non-primitive types. So for non-primitive types, I got these two examples. Let's copy them and go back. Okay, let's start with objects. Okay, I'll simplify this a little bit by creating a new variable. So let's call it, for example, people. Okay, so to define an object, you basically open two curly braces and you can put, you, so for an object to be formed, you need to give it a key and a value. It takes a key value pair. So for the first key, you could give it, you could call it user, for example, user. Oh, let's fix that. Okay. Forget about this section over here. Just concentrate for this one and we're gonna go over that one in just a bit. So for an object, you give it a key value pair. So you basically give it a key which has a name, so user for example, and the value is the value of the variable user. So user, you can give it a name of Walid for example. So this is called the key value pair, and objects, they contain multiple key value pairs, or you can just have one. Okay. And to annotate this, for example, to give it a type, we can open colon, we can have a colon over here, and then you have two curly braces, and then you say the key name, so user, colon, and then you give it the actual type, which is going to be a string, and I'll explain why we did that right now. So basically, we declared a new variable over here called people, okay? and we told TypeScript that the type of this variable is an object that contains a key of user and a value of type string. So in this section, we're saying what's the type of the value, while in this section, when you say equal, we're giving it the actual value. So this is not a value, this is only the type of people. What does it contain? It's an object that has these things. To add more key value pairs, we can just add a comma and add another thing. For example, we can add age. And what's age? Age is a number, so we can say number. And then, as you see over here, we get an error. And this error is because this is the current type of people, and we have provided the wrong value structure for this type. So what is basically saying that in this value, we're missing a key, which is age. So that's why we need to put a comma and write age, and we need to give it a value, like 2000. Well, probably like 20. 2000 is too much. So as you saw, this is why TypeScript is helpful, why types are used in TypeScript. Because, for example, if I didn't notice this, TypeScript would tell me that there is something wrong. And this is, for this example, it's simple and I would catch it very easily, you as well, with some practice. But for more complex stuff and when the code gets bigger and bigger, TypeScript is so important and it helps you figure out a lot of issues before they even run in the code. So let's go to the example below. So this user is basically an object that has two key value pairs. The first one, it has a username of type string. So we know that there's a username that's a string. And we have another variable that's called isProgrammer. So over here are basically variable names. So we have another variable, a key value pair, and its type is boolean. And we can set this, for example, to set this for, we're getting an error here. Let's forget about this. Oh yeah, we did not update the key name. Okay, so since we created a variable called user and we gave it a type, so what should it look like? So basically types tell TypeScript what a variable should look like. So we're saying that users should look like this. It should have a key of username and a value of type string, and it should have another key of a key called isProgrammer and a value type of boolean. So that's why when we set it equal, we can give it an object. So an object is just opening curly braces, and then we can have a key of a string. We can call it anything we want over here. So username, we can just say ultimate dev, and we can give it. I'll tell you why I have isProgrammer over here right now. And we can give the isProgrammer. So just write isProgrammer a value of true, since we're programmers. So here's how you basically write types and how you use them. So basically, as you saw before, I had an is programmer without a value, and you know that each key should have a value with it. So it should be a key value pair. But I didn't have it before because if the key and you have another variable which is the same exact name, you don't have to write the value. You just write the variable name, and since it's both a variable and a key name, it automatically infers that it's going to bring this value over here and place it in this key value pair. So let's move on to arrays. For example, we created another variable that's okay here. Let's simplify this a bit. Well, let's leave it as it is. I'll go through it. So we created another variable that's type array. It's type of a user array. So basically how we define an array is we use two brackets over here like that. And then we told that it's an array of this type. So basically to define a string array, for example, you'd write string and then just two brackets to say that that's an array. So this is basically instead of just writing a string like that and it containing one string, you can add just brackets and then now you need to enclose this in brackets as well, but you can add more strings to it. So anything over here, something else. So this is basically how you define an array type. Just add two brackets at the end of any type you want. In the example below, it's a bit more complex because we added the brackets at the end of a bigger type. So string is just a small type. That's why it's not as complex as the one below. So let's just get this back as it was before, and let's delete this. So what this basically does is we're saying that this is a type, and since we added brackets at the end, this is an array of that type. So we can have as many values as we want in this array. So if you realize that this type is the same as the user type, so what this users is basically saying that we can store as many users as we want in this users, as many user as we want in this users. So that's why we can set its value to be an array, and when you declare an array, it's two brackets like that. So that's why we had two brackets over here, and then we can have a user inside. And as you know, in arrays, you can just add a comma and just add another value. In this case, you need to realize that the value should be the same type as this thing. So since user is the same type as the one over here, we can just duplicate that and we can change to another user, and is programmer, we can set that to false. Yeah. See, since we only have false and we don't have the same key name, we need to write is programmer and then false. And then, well, we need to change this variable name. So user1. We can just add user1. So this is basically the most things you're gonna be seeing and using for types. As you know, as you can see, this is the more non-primitive types, which is more complex because it uses multiple primitive types and combine them together. Also note that non-primitive types, they can combine primitive types with other primitive types, or they can combine non-primitive types with primitive types, or they can also combine non-primitive types with other non-primitive types. So non-primitive types can get a lot messy, while primitive types, they're fairly simple. They're either a string, they're a boolean, they're a number, or they can be undefined or null. And now let's go over a special case. So this is not really considered a type, but it's also an output. It tells you what type an output is. So it's a special case. It's not really considered a type, but we're gonna go over through it because it's part of the types thing. So to explain that, we're gonna start by creating a new method. So let's call it do something. So this is how you basically define a method inside a class. So you just give it a name, you open two parentheses and two curly braces. And then how you would use void is you'd come over here and then you'd have a colon and write void. So here's how you write a type for a function. So when you write it over here, it says that this function should output this type. Void basically means that it does not return anything. This only works for functions, and you can have functions return other stuff. For example, if you don't want the function to return anything, you just give it void. By default, if you don't have anything, it automatically does not return anything. But it's this way, it works the same as this one, but it's more verbose. And if you want the function to return other types, so for example, if you call a function and you want it to return a string, you can just write string over here. And as you notice, it's giving us an error because this function, when we call this function, it should return a string, but we're not returning a string. That's also another reason why TypeScript is important and why it helps us. So what we can do to fix this error, we can just return. So return returns a value, and then we can return, since it has to be a string, we cannot return a number. This is gonna give us an error. We need to return a string. So just open quotation marks. You can open single quotation marks or double quotation marks. Both are the same thing in TypeScript. And you can say hello, for example. So if you want to use this, for example, let's go to the start and let's call this method by writing its name and opening two parentheses. So do something. Okay, you need to use this to do something. Just add the keyword this. By adding the keyword this, you're basically referring to this current instance. Let's back up a little bit and explain why you need to use this. So basically, when we're writing this script, it's creating a template, and whenever you attach a script to an object, it creates an instance. So it's basically copying this. It's basically using the template on this object. So you can use this script on two objects, for example, and each variable name is going to be separate. That's why we need to use this to refer to the current object or to the current instance of a script that we're currently running on. So you write this to do something, which is the method name, and then you open two parentheses, and then now you can end it with a semicolon, which is not essential, but it's good to have. And as we know, this returns a number. I'm sorry, this returns a string. So as you can see here, TypeScript automatically knows that this is gonna return a string. And we can console.log the string by doing console.log, logging this thing. Okay, we need to use the semicolon over here and put it at the end. And if we save this and we attach the types script to an object, let's do that. So wait for it to compile. Let's get a new object. So shapes, cube, and then we're gonna go to the properties section on the right. We're gonna attach script and we're gonna attach the types. So scripts don't run unless they're attached on objects. And since we're not even doing anything physically in the world, we're just using the console.log. That's why we need to attach it to an object. So we can start the world, and as we see, we get hello. And here let's go over through it again so you understand why it gets hello. So the script runs, and as you know, the start method is a special method that automatically runs as long as the script is attached on an object. And after this runs, it's gonna console.log. What is it gonna console.log? It's gonna console.log this function. So when it console.logs this function, it's gonna go to the function over here. It's gonna call it, and then this function, what it basically does, it returns a value of hello, which is a string. And then this gets returned instead of this function. So this is gonna turn into a hello, and basically it's gonna console.log hello. So this is just a what's the core importance of TypeScript and how to use them. If you like this video, let me know what other videos you want me to do, and don't forget to like and subscribe this video.